There are moments when life asks you to slow down, not because something terrible is about to happen, but because awareness is required before the next step. This message is not meant to frighten you or rush you. It is meant to interrupt momentum. The kind of momentum that carries people forward without reflection, where decisions are made quickly and consequences arrive slowly, often long after the emotion that caused them has faded. When people hear words like mistake or future, their minds immediately jump to fear. They imagine one action that ruins everything. But that is not how life usually works. Most futures are not burned in a single dramatic moment. They are shaped quietly, by choices made while distracted, overwhelmed, or emotionally charged. This message is meant for reflection. It is not a prediction. It is an invitation to pause. If this resonates with you, take a breath and let your body settle. You do not need to defend yourself from this message. You do not need to agree with everything you hear. Take what speaks to your heart and release what does not. Wisdom has a way of arriving gently when the noise quiets. Many people confuse urgency with importance. Urgency feels loud. It demands immediate action. It convinces you that if you do not act right now, you will lose something forever. Importance, on the other hand, is calm. It waits. It asks you to become present before moving forward. Spiritual maturity often begins when you learn to tell the difference between the two. Think back to moments in your life where a single reaction changed the direction of things. Not because it was evil or intentional, but because it was rushed. A message sent in frustration. A decision made while exhausted. A boundary crossed because you wanted peace in the moment, even if it cost you peace later. These are not moral failures. They are human moments. And humans learn through awareness, not punishment. This message is not saying that your future is fragile. It is reminding you that attention protects what matters. When you move through life on autopilot, repeating familiar patterns without questioning them, you give power to habits that no longer serve you. Awareness interrupts that cycle. It gives you space to choose differently, not out of fear, but out of alignment. If you feel tension rising as you listen, notice it without judgment. Tension often appears when something important is being touched. Not something dangerous, but something true. This is why stillness matters. Stillness creates clarity. Clarity creates better decisions. And better decisions shape a future that feels stable instead of reactive. Pray on this quietly, not for answers, but for discernment. Discernment does not shout. It does not rush you. It settles into your awareness like a steady presence, guiding you away from impulsive choices and toward thoughtful ones. This message is not asking you to do anything dramatic. It is asking you to notice how you move, how you respond, and how often you act before listening to yourself. Right now, the most powerful thing you can do is slow your inner pace. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not about to lose everything. You are being invited to choose awareness over reaction. That choice alone has protected more futures than any warning ever could. Let this message sit with you. There is no pressure here. Only space. The mistake being spoken about here is not something obvious. It is not illegal, dramatic, or visibly destructive. In fact, most people commit it regularly without ever labeling it as a mistake at all. That is precisely why it is dangerous. It hides inside normal behavior, everyday reactions, and socially accepted habits. The error is allowing emotion to outrun wisdom. In the next 24 hours, you will likely encounter a moment that feels small on the surface. A conversation, a decision, a response, something that does not announce itself as important. And yet, it carries weight because it reinforces a pattern. Patterns are what build futures, not isolated events. People often believe that their future is shaped by big milestones. Jobs, relationships, money, opportunities. But those things are outcomes. The foundation beneath them is emotional regulation. The ability to pause when triggered. The ability to listen when defensive. The ability to delay gratification when the ego wants immediate relief. The mistake happens when you act to soothe discomfort instead of acting in alignment with who you are becoming. This might look like saying yes when your spirit says no, simply to avoid tension. It might look like reacting sharply to someone because you feel misunderstood. It might look like escaping into distraction instead of sitting with an uncomfortable truth. None of these actions seem catastrophic, but repeated over time, they quietly train your nervous system to prioritize relief over growth. That is how futures are burned. Not in flames, but in slow erosion. There is a reason exhaustion often precedes regret. When you are tired, overwhelmed, or emotionally overloaded, your capacity for discernment shrinks. You default to habits. You choose familiarity over wisdom. You react instead of respond. This is not weakness. It is biology. But awareness allows you to interrupt it. In the next 24 hours, pay attention to moments where you feel rushed internally. That internal push that says, just do it, or say something now, or fix this immediately. That voice is not intuition. Intuition is calm. That voice is discomfort demanding resolution. The mistake is mistaking urgency for truth. Many people damage relationships, careers, and self-trust by acting before emotions settle. Words spoken in heightened emotion cannot be unsaid. Decisions made for short-term relief often create long-term consequences. Not because the decision was evil, but because it was incomplete. It did not include patience, perspective, or foresight. This message is not telling you to freeze or overthink everything. It is asking you to insert a pause, even a brief one, long enough for your values to catch up with your emotions, long enough for clarity to replace impulse. The future version of you does not need perfection. It needs consistency. It needs you to protect your energy, your integrity, and your direction in small moments. Those small moments compound. They become stability. They become trust. They become peace. You are not being tested. You are being trained. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you strengthen a part of yourself that cannot be shaken easily by chaos. That strength becomes your protection. In the next 24 hours, if something inside you says, pause, listen. That pause is not fear. It is wisdom asking for space. This is not a warning meant to scare you. It is guidance meant to steady you. What makes the next 24 hours significant is not superstition, timing tricks, or emotional manipulation. It matters because moments of transition always arrive quietly. They rarely announce themselves with clarity. Most people miss them because they are waiting for something dramatic, when in reality, change almost always enters disguised as routine. You are standing in a narrowing corridor of choice, not between good and evil, but between awareness and autopilot. Every season of life has invisible thresholds. When you cross them unconsciously, you carry old patterns into new spaces. That is how people repeat the same pain in different settings, with different faces, calling it bad luck instead of unexamined behavior. The future does not punish. It reflects. This is why this moment matters. You are being invited to notice yourself. Notice how quickly you justify certain reactions. Notice how often you silence your intuition because it feels inconvenient. Notice how easy it is to blame circumstances instead of observing patterns. These habits are subtle, but they are powerful. They shape the direction of your life more reliably than motivation ever will. Many people pray for change while protecting the behaviors that keep them stuck. The danger is not that you will make a single wrong choice. The danger is reinforcing the belief that you are powerless to choose differently. That belief becomes a lens through which you see everything. Opportunities feel threatening. Silence feels uncomfortable. Stillness feels like stagnation. So you keep moving, reacting, filling space, even when your soul is asking for restraint. This is how inner noise drowns out guidance. In moments like this, discernment is not about knowing what to do. It is about knowing what not to rush. When you slow down, patterns reveal themselves. When you pause, motives become clearer. When you stop performing for approval, you hear what actually matters. The future you want is not built by intensity. It is built by alignment. Alignment means your actions match your values, even when no one is watching. It means choosing long-term peace over short-term validation. It means tolerating discomfort long enough for wisdom to surface. This is not easy. Growth never is. But it is simple. There is a reason people often feel resistance right before clarity. The ego fears loss of control. The mind prefers certainty, even if that certainty is painful. Awareness threatens old identities. It asks questions that habits cannot answer. But this resistance is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign you are close to something honest. In the next 24 hours, something will invite you to choose speed over thought, comfort over truth, reaction over reflection. When it happens, you will feel it in your body first. A tightening, a rush, a desire to resolve discomfort immediately. That is your signal. You do not need to suppress emotion. You need to witness it. When you witness instead of obey, you reclaim authority over your inner world. That authority becomes stability. Stability becomes trust. Trust becomes direction. This is how futures are protected, not by fear, but by presence. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are being asked to grow in awareness, not effort. And awareness, once practiced, cannot be taken from you. The most dangerous choices rarely feel dangerous in the moment. They feel justified. They feel necessary. They feel urgent. That is how they slip past discernment without resistance. By the time consequences appear, the decision already feels distant, like something that just happened rather than something you chose. There are signs before this happens. Quiet ones. Internal ones. Most people ignore them because they are inconvenient. One of the first signs is emotional narrowing. Your thinking becomes rigid. You stop considering alternatives. You feel certain, not because you are clear, but because uncertainty feels intolerable. This is when people say things like, "I don't care anymore," or "This is just how I am." Those statements sound confident, but they are often signals of emotional overload. Another sign is the urge to explain yourself prematurely. When you feel compelled to justify a decision before it even happens, it usually means part of you already knows it may not be aligned. True clarity does not need defense. It stands quietly. Watch for exaggerated thinking. Words like always, never, everyone, no one. These are not truths. They are emotional shortcuts the mind uses when it wants to avoid nuance. When life feels compressed into extremes, wisdom has already been pushed aside. There is also the body's response. Shallow breathing, tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, restlessness. These are not random sensations. They are information. Your nervous system reacts before your rational mind catches up. When the body tightens, it is often because you are preparing to act against yourself. People confuse peace with relief. Relief feels like escape. Peace feels like expansion. Relief comes quickly and fades. Peace arrives slowly and stays. When a decision promises immediate relief but leaves you feeling smaller afterward, it is rarely the right one. Another subtle sign is when you seek agreement instead of truth. You look for someone to validate the impulse, not challenge it. You tell the story in a way that guarantees sympathy. This is not deception. It is self-protection. But it also keeps you trapped in patterns. Silence is often the final warning sign. Not external silence, but inner silence. When intuition goes quiet, it is not because it has nothing to say. It is because it is being ignored. Intuition does not compete with noise. It waits. In the next 24 hours, if you feel disconnected from yourself, rushed, or emotionally justified, slow down. That slowing is not weakness. It is strength reclaiming control. You do not need to cancel decisions or avoid life. You need to interrupt momentum long enough to feel where you are being pulled from. Ask yourself one question before responding, speaking, or choosing. Is this coming from fear or from clarity? Fear does not always feel dramatic. Often it feels practical, logical, reasonable. But fear-based choices contract the future. Clarity-based choices expand it, even when they are uncomfortable. You are not being warned because something bad is guaranteed to happen. You are being guided because something better is possible if you remain present. Awareness is not passive. It is active restraint. It is choosing not to feed impulses that have already proven they do not serve you. It is trusting that you do not need to rush to be safe. The future you want is protected not by effort, but by discernment practiced in small moments like this one. Interrupting a pattern does not require force. Force usually strengthens what you are trying to stop. What actually breaks patterns is awareness applied at the right moment. Not after the damage, not in regret, but in the space just before action. That space is where change lives. Most people believe they fail because they are weak. That is a comforting lie. Weakness can be fixed. Unawareness is harder, because you cannot correct what you refuse to see. This is why guidance often comes as a pause rather than an instruction. You are not being told what to do. You are being invited to notice. In the next 24 hours, the moment to interrupt the pattern will feel ordinary. That is the trap. You will be tempted to dismiss it as insignificant. A tone of voice. A message you almost send. A a decision you are about to rush. The mind will say, "This doesn't matter." But the spirit knows better. Small choices are rehearsals for larger ones. The interruption begins by naming what is happening internally. Not judging it. Naming it. I feel rushed. I feel defensive. I feel the urge to escape. When you name an impulse, you step out of it. You create distance. That distance gives you choice. Then comes the hardest part. Waiting. Waiting does not mean doing nothing forever. It means delaying reaction long enough for clarity to surface. Sometimes that wait is minutes. Sometimes hours. Sometimes a full day. The length does not matter. What matters is that you do not allow emotion to hijack direction. Many people pray for protection while ignoring the moments that require self-restraint. Protection often arrives as discomfort, as hesitation, as an inner resistance that says, "Not like this." That resistance is not sabotage. It is guidance. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. When you feel compelled to fix something immediately, pause. When you feel the pressure to choose just to end the tension, pause. These are not delays. They are course corrections. You are allowed to step back without guilt. The pattern you are being asked to interrupt may have served you once. It may have kept you safe in a different season. But survival strategies do not always belong in the future you are building. What once protected you may now be limiting you. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more honest. Honesty begins internally. Admitting when you are acting out of fear. Admitting when you want approval more than alignment. Admitting when comfort has become more important than growth. These admissions are not failures. They are turning points. The future is not destroyed in one dramatic act. It is shaped by what you tolerate repeatedly. When you tolerate misalignment, you normalize it. When you interrupt it, you reclaim authority over your direction. Authority does not mean control over others. It means stewardship over yourself. You are not being rushed by fate. You are being invited into responsibility. Responsibility for your reactions. Responsibility for your energy. Responsibility for what you reinforce with your choices. If you do not choose consciously, habit will choose for you. And habit does not care about your future. It only cares about familiarity. This moment is not about fear of consequence. It is about respect for potential. Slow down. Pay attention. Choose deliberately. That is how the pattern breaks. When you interrupt a pattern, something unexpected happens. Life does not collapse. The world does not punish you. In fact, most of the time, nothing dramatic happens at all. And that is exactly how you know you chose correctly. Growth rarely announces itself with fireworks. Choosing differently often feels anticlimactic. You do not get instant validation. You may even feel unsettled, as if you skipped a familiar step. That discomfort is not a warning sign. It is evidence that you stepped out of an old loop. The nervous system resists unfamiliar safety more than familiar chaos. What changes first is internal. The noise quiets. The urgency fades. You feel a subtle sense of self-respect return. Not pride. Not excitement. Just steadiness. That steadiness becomes a reference point. Once you feel it, it becomes harder to betray it again. This is how alignment becomes addictive. When you respond instead of react, you preserve energy. When you pause instead of explain, you protect clarity. When you walk away instead of forcing resolution, you gain leverage over your inner world. These choices do not make you passive. They make you precise. Precision is power. Over time, these small decisions compound into trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your discernment. Trust that you do not need to panic to be safe. That trust changes how you move through life. You stop chasing outcomes. You stop negotiating with your values. You stop proving yourself to people who do not hold your future. And something else happens. People respond differently to you. Not because you manipulate them, but because your energy shifts. When you are no longer reactive, others cannot pull you as easily. When you are grounded, chaos loses its grip. You become harder to provoke, harder to rush, harder to control. That is not arrogance. That is maturity. Many people mistake loud confidence for strength. Real strength is quiet. It does not argue. It does not convince. It does not rush. It simply stands. Choosing differently also reveals who and what no longer fits. Some connections weaken. Some dynamics dissolve. This can feel like loss, but it is actually clarification. Anything that required you to betray yourself to maintain was never sustainable. You are not losing people. You are losing patterns. This is where many turn back. Not because they were wrong, but because growth exposes truth. Truth can be uncomfortable. It shows you where you compromised, where you settled, where you stayed small to stay accepted. Seeing that clearly can sting, but clarity heals faster than denial. The future you want does not require you to be harder, louder, or more intense. It requires you to be more honest. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what you tolerate. Honest about what you keep repeating out of fear of the unknown. Every time you choose alignment over impulse, you strengthen a future version of yourself who feels safe inside their own decisions. That safety becomes peace. Peace becomes direction. Direction becomes momentum. Momentum built this way does not burn you out. It sustains you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are learning discernment. And discernment is not learned through information, but through practice in moments like this one. The next 24 hours are not a threat. They are an opportunity to reinforce who you are becoming. Choose presence. Choose restraint. Choose awareness. The future responds to those choices quietly, but permanently. Most people do not ignore guidance because they are rebellious or careless. They ignore it because slowing down feels unsafe. Stillness removes distraction, and distraction is what many use to avoid facing themselves. When the noise stops, truth gets loud. Not everyone is ready for that. Modern life rewards reaction. Speed is praised. Urgency is normalized. Being busy is confused with being important. In that environment, discernment feels like weakness. Pausing feels like falling behind. Reflection feels unproductive. So people keep moving, even when movement is taking them in circles. This is why warnings like this are often dismissed. They do not appeal to ego. They do not promise instant reward. They do not flatter ambition. They ask for restraint, humility, and awareness. Those qualities do not trend well. They do not generate applause, but they build futures that do not collapse under pressure. Another reason people ignore these moments is familiarity with chaos. For many, chaos feels normal. Calm feels suspicious. When life slows down, the mind looks for problems to solve, tensions to stir, conflicts to re-enter. This is not self-sabotage. It is conditioning. People return to what they know, even when what they know hurts. There is also fear of responsibility. If you become aware of your patterns, you can no longer blame circumstances entirely. Awareness removes excuses. It hands you agency. And agency is heavy. It means your choices matter. That can be terrifying for someone who has learned to survive by reacting instead of choosing. So the mind resists. It minimizes. It rationalizes. It says things like, "This is overthinking," or "Everyone does this," or "I'll deal with it later." Later is where patterns go to strengthen. The truth is uncomfortable. Ignoring guidance is easier than facing the possibility that some struggles are self-reinforced. Not self-created, but self-reinforced. That distinction matters. You are not to blame for what shaped you, but you are responsible for what you repeat. Many people also mistake faith for passivity. They wait for signs, miracles, external interventions. But guidance often arrives as self-awareness, not spectacle. It arrives as an inner check, a hesitation, a quiet knowing that something does not align. Ignoring that while waiting for something louder is how people drift. The warning is subtle because growth is subtle. Those who ignore it usually do not fail immediately. Life continues. Days pass. Nothing explodes. And that false sense of safety convinces them that the moment did not matter. But consequences rarely announce their origin. They show up later, disconnected from the choice that created them. Regret often begins with, "I didn't think it was that important." The people who do listen are not special. They are not more spiritual. They are not more disciplined. They are simply willing to tolerate discomfort without escaping it. They let tension exist without resolving it impulsively. They let questions linger without rushing to answers. That willingness is rare. It is also transformative. If you feel resistance to this message, that does not mean it is wrong for you. It likely means it touches a place you have learned to protect. Resistance is not rejection. It is information. It shows you where growth is knocking. You do not need to change everything. You need to notice one moment, one reaction, one choice where you usually default to habit. That is enough to begin. Most people will scroll past this message and return to familiar patterns. Not because they cannot change, but because they will not slow down long enough to try. If you are still here, reading this, you are already choosing differently. And that choice matters more than you think. There comes a moment in life when God does not shout. He does not send dramatic signs, force extreme circumstances, or create unnecessary pain just to get your attention. He simply watches. And that moment is exactly where you are right now. Because the most destructive mistakes are rarely born from evil intentions. They are born from distraction. They happen when someone feels the warning in their spirit and chooses to ignore it. When they sense that something is wrong but decide to delay. When they know they should pause, reflect, and change direction, yet continue moving forward as if nothing is happening. God says the danger in the next 24 hours is not a visible tragedy, but a small decision you are about to normalize. A thought you keep repeating. An action you keep justifying. A behavior you know no longer aligns with who you are becoming, yet you have not found the courage to walk away from it. The mistake that burns futures does not happen all at once. It begins quietly. It starts when you choose not to listen to that inner voice saying, "This is not for you." When you accept less than you deserve. When you remain in environments that drain your spirit. When you stay connected to relationships that have already shown every sign of expiration. God says that right now, heaven is not silent. A warning is being released over your life, not as a threat, but as protection. Because what lies ahead is not punishment. It is consequence. And consequences do not need to be cruel to be permanent. You have been feeling an uneasiness you cannot fully explain. A strange restlessness. A sense that something needs to change, even if you cannot yet name it. This is not random anxiety. This is discernment beginning to rise. This is your spirit speaking before your mind builds enough excuses to silence it. God says the future He prepared for you will not be destroyed by enemies, haters, or people wishing you harm. It is only placed at risk when you choose to act against your own conscience. When you trade clarity for comfort. When you choose approval over inner peace. Pay close attention to the next 24 hours. The conversations that come up. The opportunities that seem too convenient. The decisions that demand an immediate answer. The most dangerous mistake is rushing a choice that requires stillness and prayer. There is something specific you have been avoiding. A conversation you keep postponing. A boundary that needs to be set. A decision you know can no longer wait. God is not asking for perfection. He is asking for honesty. Honesty with yourself. Futures are not destroyed by sudden disasters. They are eroded by small compromises repeated over time. And today, that cycle can be broken. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. God says if you pause, breathe, and choose with awareness, what looked like a threat becomes protection. What felt like delay becomes divine timing. And what felt like confusion turns into clarity. This is the moment where the path quietly divides. Not dramatically, but permanently. God says the difference between protection and regret often comes down to one thing: discernment. Not emotion. Not fear. Not logic alone. Discernment is the ability to recognize what aligns with your purpose even when it feels uncomfortable, and to reject what feels familiar even when it feels safe. Right now, you are standing between two choices. One will feel urgent. The other will feel quiet. One will pressure you to decide quickly. The other will invite you to slow down. God says the choice that aligns with Him will never demand panic. It may require courage, but it will not require haste. The mistake many people make is confusing peace with comfort. Comfort feels good immediately. Peace feels right deeply. Comfort avoids tension. Peace resolves it. God says if a decision removes your anxiety temporarily but leaves a heaviness in your spirit, it is not from Him. True alignment may feel challenging at first, but it brings a deep sense of clarity once you commit. God is revealing a simple filter to help you discern correctly. Ask yourself this: does this choice require me to shrink, to stay silent, to betray what I already know is true? Or does it require me to grow, to speak honestly, to trust that God will support me even if the outcome is uncertain? The right choice will often expose fear before it brings relief. The wrong choice will often bring relief before it exposes fear. This is why discernment matters. Because your feelings alone cannot guide you here. They are too easily influenced by exhaustion, pressure, and past wounds. God says pay attention to resistance. Not external resistance from people, but internal resistance in your spirit. When something feels forced, when you feel the need to justify it repeatedly, when you hear yourself saying just this once or it's not that serious, that is a warning. Alignment does not need constant defense. There is also a physical response God placed inside you as a compass. Notice your body. The right decision may still scare you, but it will not tighten your chest. It will not steal your breath. It will not leave you restless at night. The wrong decision often shows up as tension, heaviness, and mental noise that does not quiet down. God says you already know more than you think. The confusion you feel is not a lack of information. It is a conflict between what you know and what you are afraid to do. Discernment becomes clear the moment you stop negotiating with your own conscience. Another sign God gives is repetition. If He is guiding you away from something, the same warning will appear in different forms. A conversation, a sentence that stands out, a message that feels personal, a sudden interruption. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Likewise, when God is guiding you towards something, He will provide quiet assurance, not hype. Doors may open gradually. Support may come unexpectedly. Strength may rise when you thought you had none left. Alignment does not always feel exciting, but it feels grounded. God says the worst error in the next 24 hours would be choosing what is easy over what is true. Choosing silence when truth is required. Choosing familiarity when growth is demanded. Choosing delay when clarity has already arrived. You are not being tested to see if you will fail. You are being positioned to see if you will trust. Trust that God sees beyond the moment. Trust that obedience protects futures you cannot yet imagine. Trust that walking away from the wrong door is just as powerful as walking through the right one. This is not about perfection. It is about direction. One choice leads to alignment. The other leads to erosion. And the difference will not announce itself loudly. It will whisper. God says listen. Because once this window closes, the lesson will not disappear. It will simply return in a harder form. And in the next block, God reveals what specific door is about to close, and why delaying this decision any longer will cost more than you realize.